Hello, I'm Daniel, and I'm joined here by West Midlands Combined Authority mayoral candidate Beverley Nielsen, who is running to be the mayor of the West Midlands. Thank you, Beverley, for agreeing to answer a few questions today.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to be here, Dan.
I hope the weather wasn't too much of a bother coming in.
Not at all, no. And I think the campus is looking lovely, and it's wonderful, isn't it, at this time of year to see the daffodils coming out.
It is, and it was great yesterday because of the sun.
It was a beautiful day. I know. I noticed that the temperature, well, certainly where I was yesterday, reached about 14.5, which I felt, was almost summer-like, really.
Yeah. I saw people walking around with shorts and sunglasses on. Like, what's going on here?
I saw a young woman driving in here today, and she was just wearing her shirt and carrying her rucksack, and really made me look forward to the summer months ahead.
Spring has come.
Yeah, I hope so. Fingers crossed, Dan.
So just going into the first question. So what do you think is the most important policy that you hope to implement through your campaign?
Well, really for me, the big focus of my campaign is on our young talent here in the West Midlands. We have the highest proportion of students in our city region, of any city region in the UK. But we're not known for that, are we, here in Birmingham, Coventry, the West Midlands, across the whole of the West Midlands. That's not, we're not seen as the Oxford or the Cambridge in terms of this tremendous brain power that we have. But actually, we do have it. It is a fact. And this human goldmine is my top priority in my campaign, because we have a brain drain at the moment. Too much of our young talent is leaving the region after they're graduating. And I'm really focused on how can we try and retain and develop, have a part in the development of this incredible talent for the future. And that's going to be good for the young people involved, and it's going to be good for the region. So that is my top priority.
Now, the area that the West Midlands Combined Authority covers includes, I believe it's Birmingham, Wolverhampton, Coventry, Sandwell, Dudley, Solihull and Walsall.
That's correct.
And there are many universities and colleges that are just around the area.
Yes.
How do you see your role kind of bringing them together under the West Midlands umbrella? Because this will probably be the first time that this has kind of a regional collaboration of that sort.
Well, there are various bodies in higher education. West Midlands Higher Education is an organisation pulling together the universities. But I think what's really needed here is for us as a region to understand the expertise that sits in our universities, how market ready some of this expertise and the research is, how we can apply that to the particular strengths of industry and business in our region, and link the two more tightly together. And you have a fantastic role model here at Warwick University and WMG, and of course in the business school as well. And what we need to see is how can we learn the great lessons, the experiences of institutions across the region, but especially leading institutions, and draw on that and help other universities to learn. And that's what I'd like to see, is universities linking together, learning from each other more. I'd like to see it much clearer as to what research expertise, applied research expertise in particular, we have across the region. I'd like to see our students doing more in terms of applied projects, getting out into the businesses, working with them sooner during their degrees, so that the opportunities for them to perhaps work with those businesses following graduation are much clearer to them at an earlier stage, and that the businesses themselves can see the opportunities and advantages of working with students. Because let's not forget, we've got a big number of SMEs out there, and many of them have never employed a graduate before. So if we can help them to see earlier on what are the advantages of working with a graduate, how can graduates and undergraduates really add value in those businesses in really practical ways, then that's a benefit to both partners.
And I guess you're seeing this as a symbiotic thing. So you'd have the talent pool attracting in the SMEs, and then as well the SMEs attracting the talent pool to stay.
I think we have to make exactly right what you've just said, Dan. I think we have to make it much simpler for the businesses to understand what are the advantages of working with universities, that it's not just a bureaucratic exercise, that they might get a little bit of advantage if they're lucky out of, but actually it's almost like a must-have, and it's right here on your doorstep, and it can lead to tremendous advantage. And I know that your university, other universities, Birmingham City University, where I've worked for the last decade, all of the universities across the region are using a number of tools. We've got innovation vouchers, we've got knowledge transfer partnerships. There's all sorts of possibilities through applied research as well for businesses to get engaged at no or little cost to them, and for them to see how a new brain, a fresh set of eyes, and especially a young brain that's helped with an academic who can sort of advise and sort of mediate this relationship, and also bring a more experienced set of eyes into that business, can be of tremendous benefit. But equally, I think we need the businesses coming into the universities, and I'm not sure how that works here at Warwick. I do know that, at WMG there's a lot of business people going in, and I'm sure it's the same at the business school and elsewhere. But certainly we know from America and Harvard and MIT and places like that, there's a tremendous flow of people from business into academia, and a great transfer of ideas and current knowledge and practice into those institutions. And I think, ideally, I'd like to see a target set or a kind of notional target, because targets can be quite dangerous too, but something like 20% of academics have come out of industry into or out, in the industrially relevant areas of academia, have come out of industry and are working in academia or with academia to ensure that there really is a very close relationship, and that the problems that we're faced with in an applied sense are being tackled in the most positive way.
Now, you mentioned the fact of trying to keep students within the West Midlands, prevent this brain drain.
Yes.
But given the changes that will have on things like housing and just how do you think this is going to affect kind of the living standards and just the impact on the livelihoods and the impact of just the communities in the area?
Yeah, well, I think it's a really good point, Dan. One of the things I feel is that I would really like to work towards the West Midlands being the most student-friendly city region in the UK, that we are known as the place where students really want to live and work following graduation. And what does that take? Well, I'm offering free transport to young people 16 to 25. Housing is absolutely critical. We need much more variety of housing, and we need quality accommodation, because I know from talking to students at University of Birmingham that multiple occupancy residencies are a challenge.
Yeah.
And that landlords aren't always as supportive as we need them to be. But equally, the infrastructure sitting around the residencies is very important, that it's safe. We need good lighting. We need clear pathways. We need, in certain instances, CCTV. We certainly need digital connectivity so that students are safe. I want to see across all of the West Midlands the very best practice implemented. Again, there's a lot of experience from the States and elsewhere around the world. Let's look at all of that. I'm sure we already are, but let's make sure that we're in the vanguard and we're innovating. We're leading in this area, and we're well capable of it, I know. And institutions like this that are real leaders across the world, we need our reputation to be leading academically and in terms of student well-being and in terms of quality of life that we're offering to our young people. And I see that as an absolute priority.
Now, but what about the kind of changes to the business community? If you're talking about, innovation and allowing more SMEs to flourish in that region, and if you're talking about keeping students within the region after graduation, then do you think that will have an impact on the type of jobs or the type of businesses or the types of communities that are already existing in the region?
I do think they can, and I think they can have a much greater impact still. I mean, I've just been reading an article this morning about £1 billion investment in electric vehicles in the region. Of course, we know that Jaguar Land Rover is investing $650 million in this area. We know that actually we really are world leaders in this, in the aspects of electric vehicles, battery power. Here we've got the Energy Research Accelerator at Warwick. We have tremendous experience and leadership in driverless vehicles, and these are all areas where we need the best talent to be helping ensure that we're driving literally and figuratively into the future through the 21st century. We do know that last year we sold globally 1.2 million electric vehicles, and we breached the 1 million barrier for sales of these vehicles. But equally, 20 million vehicles are expected to be sold by 2020, and by 2030, 100 million vehicles. This is a huge growth market, and we need to grab it with both hands, and we need to plan in a very proactive way. And this is where I see collaboration between public and private sectors and the sort of merged sectors of a university, which brings both together in a really positive way. We need to see us working together to make sure that we've got a long-term plan over the next 10 years, and that we're pulling in all the investment we can, because universities are investing a lot of money. And if we can match some of this investment by universities and by our leading institutions, I believe there's a real opportunity to pull more investment into the region. So I think there is a tremendous opportunity here for us, for our young people, and for the businesses across the region.
Now, one of the biggest impacts on the industries as a whole has probably been Brexit recently. So how do you think that result is going to impact the Midlands, especially as negotiations go on?
I'm very concerned about it. Obviously, as a Lib Dem, I personally voted Remain. I remain convinced that that's the best option for our country, but I also am very conscious of the democratic decision that's been made. I know, however, that it wasn't a vote about a soft or a hard Brexit. It was a vote about Brexit. The difference between soft and hard Brexit, I think, could be very considerable on this region. Hard Brexit, if that means reverting, for example, to WTO rules, tariffs being imposed on us, that could be very considerable in terms of particularly automotive, aerospace, our strength in these regions. We are the manufacturing heartland of the UK. I personally have, done some research into this area and estimate that manufacturing, through its secondary impacts, accounts for over 30% of our GDP in this region. So anything that increases our costs and undermines our competitiveness and our ability to access our single biggest market, the European single market, accounting for 42% of our exports, is an issue for us. And I'm worried that, we're importing about 80% of components in automotive at the moment, and we're exporting. We apparently, as the Midlands, are the sort of biggest exporter in the UK, of 19%. And I think that if we're seeing rises in prices on cars through the impact of tariffs, both on imports and then as we export the car, of around 12% or something of that sort, that's quite considerable. We've obviously had the depreciation in sterling that affects the selling price, but the import price have been affected equally by the fall in sterling. So it's a complex picture. I think we need a seat at the negotiating table. Manchester already have a seat at the negotiating table, and I think it's really shocking that the West Midlands, as the biggest manufacturing region in the UK, that, let's face it, London politicians too often know nothing about, must have its voice heard loud and clear at that negotiating table.
Now, in terms of just the campaign and the elections going on, one of the questions that's been raised is this question of turnout. So this is probably one of the first times that you had so many kind of councils going to vote at the same time for one position. Do you have a concern that there's going to be an imbalance in terms of where the votes come from? So I think there was one of the positions that was raised before, or one of the readings that I looked at was, it's an off-election year for Birmingham, but it's not an off-election year for everyone else.
Yeah.
And whether that will affect, the turnout, the numbers of where you get the support and who's coming out to vote.
Well, I think that you raise a very good point. The fact that we don't have local council elections in part of the region is really a problem, a concern. And this is a 3-year term because it realigns then in 2020. That's the idea. It is also, by the way, worth just raising that it's a supplementary vote, which means that you get two choices, a first and a second preference. And I don't know, I'm sure people may not be aware that it's the top two people that go through. So whoever gets the most votes in round one, the top two of those, because at the moment there's 5 candidates, then they will go through. And then the second preferences to the ones that have dropped out will be distributed amongst the top 2. So that's the voting system, the supplementary vote. It is an issue. I'm loath to sort of talk about low turnouts because I really want to urge everybody who has a vote, especially young people, to get out and vote, because I feel that young people have been the most let down through the Brexit vote. And I'm really targeting all my focus on young people at universities like yours. And alongside my free transport promise, I am looking to offer bursaries to young people who are working with SMEs and manufacturing businesses. And I'm also looking to set up a 1 billion innovation fund, again, working particularly closely with the universities of the region to try and again focus on how can we really deliver impact through our research, really bridge the gap between academia and applied activity in the marketplace through a mind-to-market research approach. So I would urge, and I really like to urge, all young people, all students here, anybody, of course, working here as well, the staff, please to get out and vote. 7 to 10, the polling stations are open, so there's quite a lot of time on the 4th, and it's, sort of May the 4th be with you, just to remember when it is. So, let's try and sort of break the expectations and really show people that we actually can make a difference here. We want to be accountable for ourselves. And I think, this is a really perfect opportunity for us to make the future for ourselves, by ourselves. And we really can do this. And another thing, Dan, if I can just take advantage while we're talking about this, is that people say, the powers of the mayor are very limited, transport, housing, adult skills, and education. And the Labour candidate has in the past, sort of complained that the powers are very limited. But my view is that actually this leadership role and the soft powers that go around it are what matters most of all, because by combining together, by working together, by making sure our voice is heard and not overlooked, as it has been too often in the past, we can be a force that can control our future and can be, a force to be reckoned with by London, Westminster and the rest of the world. And we need to make sure we're never overlooked again, that we always get our fair share of investment, because in the past, the Labour and Conservative politicians are quite happy to talk about, the fact that we get under 10% per head investment in transport, as though it's nothing to do with them. Mm. But they've been running the place for the last 20 years. Why have they done it, would be my question. I think it's pretty appalling that we get so little investment in transport when we take 80% of the rail freight for the country and 30% of the road freight. Well, how can you possibly justify that kind of investment and think that we're going to be productive and competitive without the investment we need to move our goods and people around? So it's not good enough, and I think people here need to stand up, make sure their voice is heard and that they are counted.
Now, you've made a point in your campaign as well to highlight the fact that you're not a career politician. And in fact, you've had the Back Beverley campaign, which has appealed directly to individuals to fund your support against these larger political parties.
Yes.
Now, what are the challenges that you think this approach may face? You obviously are going up against these bigger party machinery.
Yes.
But at the same time, you're bouncing out with kind of the grassroots support. How successful do you think that's been so far?
Yeah, well, I really think it's early days. We have only got 8 weeks left, of course, to the election. I think it's something that is gathering momentum. I think as people sort of meet with us and see that we're very sincere, very genuine, really, as you say, I'm not a career politician. I don't have to do this. I'm doing it because I believe in it, because I feel actually appalled at the fact that we haven't had our fair share in the past. I've lived and worked here for 20 years. And in that time, as I was looking back over the 20 years and thinking about standing for the Lib Dems as Metro Mayor candidate, I couldn't think of very much government investment into this region. It just there wasn't, and we'd been passed over so many times. And I felt that we'd had these dreadful cuts over the last 5 years or so, 50% cuts to public service grants in our local government, cuts to social care, cuts to adult education, which has been cut by over 50%. Can you think of that? Over 50% cuts to people who come and maybe need to learn English language skills. All those courses being cut. Libraries closing right across the region. Walsall, for example, looking to close 16 out of 17 libraries. Cuts all over the place. Coventry, they've had to close 3 elderly care homes and move those old, vulnerable people away from their families. There are cuts everywhere that you can think that affect the quality of life of young people, of older people, of the most vulnerable in our society. And I don't think that's right. And the strategic economic plan for the region, referred to as the Super SEP, it basically says that the West Midlands businesses, there are too many low value, low output businesses, and that we have to become what they call a net contributor. And what that means is, effectively, by 2020, we will have to cut another 4 billion out of our public sector budgets, because the balancing net, which is called the block grant, goes in 2020. So on top of all these dreadful cuts, we've got another 4 billion of cuts. And I think that that just isn't good enough. And we've got to stand up. How can we be net contributors without investing in our people and in our place? And I really want to urge your fellow students, the staff here, everybody who cares about the place where we all live and work, and that is sort of giving to us something, that is enriching our lives. Well, let's all give back by just voting and making a difference.
On a final point, so we mentioned earlier that you're not a career politician, but you've also had a broad career. You've gone through policy research, you worked in fashion for a bit, you've done media work, business, like you mentioned, you were in BCU for 10 years.
Yes.
Now, how do you see all these varied experiences just coming together for your campaign? Because your competitors, they've had very almost solitary careers.
Yes, that's true. Well, I have been a local politician too, which you didn't mention. And what I found from politics is that you have to be able to relate to people from all sorts of backgrounds, people who have been very successful in life, and people whose lives have been more deprived and less privileged, and people who have worked in all kinds of areas and had all sorts of careers. And you've got to sort of be able to relate to all of that and bring it together and understand also what is special about this region. And I think understanding what's special about this region isn't just about reading some stats. In fact, if anything, stats can be, as we know, rather distracting and often really obfuscate. They don't tell you quite what you feel in your heart is going on the ground, because you've observed it and you've lived it and you've been amongst it for 20 years or so. So I think all of this experience is really important in distilling what's out there, living amongst it for that period of time, and making sense of it, and comparing it with other parts of the world. I've lived in New York, I've lived in London, Dusseldorf, Dublin, where I was a stockbroker for a while. And it's sort of, you compare and contrast and pull it together and then come out with what is really at the essence of this place that makes it so special, and that needs to be celebrated. And for me, the very special thing about this place is the ingenuity, the creativity, and the ability to produce things that have changed the world, not just once, with the Industrial Revolution, with Abraham Darby and the smelting of iron ore with coke and the launching of that process, which changed the quality of life for people around the world, not just the communications revolution, when we were the first to develop integrated circuit boards and satellite communications, and not just now as we move forward in terms of, mass production and obviously now artificial intelligence and so forth, but everything to do with the connectivity that will mean that everything digital is absolutely integrated into the things we make. And we are at the vanguard of that, and we can lead the next industrial revolution, and we can change the world again.
Thank you so much for that, Beverley. I'm Dan. You're listening to Raw 1251 AM. I've just interviewed Beverley Nielsen, the Lib Dem candidate for the West Midlands Combined Authority Metro Mayor elections. That's coming up on the 4th of May.
4th of May.
And may the 4th be with you.
Thank you, Dan.